Okay, today I'm with Nick Child that's come all the way from Singapore just for this interview, well maybe not, but thanks very much for agreeing to talk to us, Nick, in your time over here. Can you tell us what your current position is at the moment?
Yeah, current position, Simon, at the Singapore Turf Club. Obviously Kranji is our racecourse, presenter, producer, race caller is my role over at in Singapore, and I've been there nearly 3 years, so yeah, enjoying it. Back here at Goodwood for a little bit of a holiday, a little bit of a break, and obviously lovely to be back at a wonderful racecourse, and even better to be talking to you.
Thank you very much. Now, looking at doing my research, you're from a non-racing background, in fact brought up on a council estate in Islington, so how on earth did you get interest in horse racing to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dalmeny Avenue was where I grew up, and as you say, in Islington, just up between sort of Holloway and Camden Town. Family full of Arsenal fans, as you'd imagine, being from there. So look, racing was never so much cemented in the sort of the family DNA in regards to a job or a vocation. It was very much a punt and having a bet, and that came from my grandfather. He was in my world anyway, he was a great man, and he got me interested in racing. And it was one Christmas, I went, it was Christmas, you want to buy presents for people, you want to sort of have a good time and make it enjoyable for everyone, and my mother suggested that I go and sit up with my grandfather and have a bet. So I remember he put my first bet on for me. I was probably about 12 or 13, and it all just went from there. I was hooked from an early age, and it's sort of 99% through him that I took an interest in racing, and from there it's just snowballed, and I've been able to go on and do some wonderful things. But yeah, a council estate in Islington certainly probably isn't breeding ground for big racing names, that's for sure.
So did that first bet that hooked you on horse racing and not betting?
It sort of well, I've never been a big punter. I think to start, the punt has never really been, say, the be all and end all for me. I can really give or take it, but I think the whole aspect of the sport and the way in which racing is conducted, and just I think like anyone would testify, and yourself, I'm sure, that they're the most gracious of animals, and I just think what they're able to do, and what a racehorse can achieve both on the flat and over jumps is just phenomenal, and that's what I love about it. I love the sport, the camaraderie, and having worked then with a lot of people in different yards and so on and so forth. It's just a lovely community to be involved in, and to be honest, I mean, I left school probably, I wasn't an A-grade student by any stretch. I'd like to have plenty of common knowledge and general know-how and whatnot, but once I sort of discovered the racing, 12, 13, going on 14, it wasn't so much taking the course books to, the homework books to school. It was more of a racing post. So from a young age, it
was taking the tube to Andrew Reid's Mill Hill Yard, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah. So it came to a point. I was about 15, and at school, you choose to do your work experience, and by this point, I was that hooked on racing that I said, right, and given my stature, I was never going to be a jockey, but I thought the idea of this seems pretty fun and a good idea. And I went into my work experience teacher, and I basically said, I want to go to a racing yard. And with the powers of the internet and so on and so forth, I discovered Andrew Reid, trained in Mill Hill, which is only a stone's throw from us really, on the tube up to sort of Finchley and Mill Hill East and whatnot. And I couldn't go there until I'd had some experience with horses. So I got sent to a riding school in Barnet for a week, where I knew absolutely nothing. Learnt the bare basics, learnt just being around a horse or a pony, and then I ended up going to Andrews for a week, and then from there I then was able to stay on during the summer holidays and go in there, and I learnt a lot there. I learned how to ride. I led horses up. We led up winners, and I just learned everything at Andrew Reid's. And I owe him and everyone there a huge debt of gratitude, because without them I probably wouldn't be here now, and racing probably wouldn't be my thing as such. But getting the tube to Andrews was a bit different. Most people get on the tube in suits and with newspapers and whatnot, and I was on there with riding boots and a whip and a hat and wanting to go into Andrew Reid's.
So from there you went to Seamus Mullins?
I did, yeah. I went to Seamus. So I was at Andrews, and I was obviously very much a kid, and I'd just come into the end of school, secondary school, and basically I thought, where can I go? And I never went on to further education, which, looking back on it, probably was perhaps not so much a silly thing to do, but I like to think I've ended up doing okay. But it was either going to be Seamus Mullins or David Pipe at the time, and I had my sights set on being a point-to-point jockey, and David Pipe at that moment in time was the champion point-to-point trainer, so I thought, well, he'd be ideal. And how I stumbled across Seamus Mullins, I really do not know. I was sort of searching the web, and I sent him an email. He asked me down for an interview as such, and I remember riding out a couple of horses down there. I certainly wasn't very good at it then, and yeah, he offered me a job, and I think I basically left school on the Friday, and I started there on the Monday, and that was it. I mean, I was a 16-year-old lad, dropped off by my parents. Mother confesses to crying all the way back to London, having dropped me off down in Wiltshire. And I just, it was into the real world then. I was then living with people of an older age and stable staff accommodation, and with that, obviously, all the, everything else comes with it. The sort of the drinking culture as such in racing. Obviously, then having a bet, and obviously the going out, the larking around, and all that sort of jazz. So, no, look, it was a great education, and Seamus was wonderful, and actually it's come full circle now, because it's probably 16, pushing 17 years on that I've now got a filly in training with him, who actually ran recently at Sandown, ran a good race to finish 4th, and hopefully we'll get a win or two out of her, and that would just be really nice, because sort of perhaps it's almost my way of giving a bit back to him, to say thank you for everything he taught me. And I never forget it, the first day we rode out together with Seamus, his exact comments were, I'll either make or break you, and I was there for a solid 2 years, and rode in my first point-to-point while I was down there, trained a point-to-pointer just as a 17-year-old, so I learnt a lot. I sort of crammed a lot in, as I usually do, and yeah, that was great.
And then you went further west, or southwest, to Philip Hobbs.
That's right, yeah. So, and then from Seamus, I mean, I don't know what it was at the time. I was sort of doing these 2-year stints, and maybe it was getting to the end of the second year, and thinking I'm getting this is getting a bit stale now. I want to move somewhere else. But yeah, that sort of all came to a head, and there was a job advertised with Mr. Hobbs, and obviously he's a trainer that needs no introduction really. We know how good a trainer he is, and he gets results, and he's had a lot of good horses and good winners. And I went down to Sandhill, and I really loved it down there actually. I think of all my jobs, that was probably one of the nicest, because Minehead and that sort of area, the Quantocks, I thought was lovely. And I went down there, spent a couple of years with Mr. Hobbs, and again just continued to progress. I was doing a bit more down there in regards to helping running of the yard and stuff like that, and yeah, just had a great time. And I think most importantly, Simon, as well, is that as you know yourself, in racing you meet a lot of good people and a lot of interesting people, and you make good friends, and that's exactly what I've done the whole way through. Whether it be Andrews, Seamus's, Philip Hobbs's, or wherever. I've always met some very good people and learnt a lot, and those friendships are still solid to today. So racing has been so good to me, and even up until that point into my early 20s, I was just thoroughly enjoying what I was doing. And Philip, just a gentleman, him and Sarah, two lovely people to work for and work with, and that's how it always felt. You felt like you were working with them and not for them. So, but no, I led up my first Cheltenham Festival runner when I was working down there. A horse called Bosham Mill and the Fox Hunters, and yeah, it was just a wonderful time really. Yeah.
And then you hit the jackpot.
Hit the jackpot. I then moved sort of a bit more around the West Country, a bit more around Somerset, and then Paul Nicholls is. I think, not that I'm in any way famous at all, but I guess a lot of people might associate me with the great Kauto Star, and I was just very lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, and it came about that I was allowed to look after him and be his groom. I was there for a year, and in the summer of 2008, his groom at the time, Sonia Warburton, had left, and I was probably a massive price to get Kauto Star. I was never considered, and yeah, they let me look after him, and it was just that was amazing. That was just an amazing journey.
Now, was it any different looking after a good one to a modest one?
Well, most definitely. I think anyone that says any different is probably telling lies, but you treat them all the same. At the end of the day, they're horses, and we're there to look after them. And I think obviously there's all this and I certainly won't go into it because I don't think I'm qualified enough. But debates with whips and things like that. As far as racehorses get 5-star treatment. They're so well looked after, and yeah, whether it be a Gold Cup winner or a selling plater, you do obviously give them the same level of treatment. But yes, you would tend to a much better one. That's that little bit differently, and I certainly would with him. He was a bit special, and we sort of kept him in his routine. We made sure he was okay, and everything was perfect with him. And yeah, I mean, look, being a horse lover, you look after them all the same, and you treat them fairly and equally. Yeah?
And what would have been your highlights? I suppose the Gold Cup, obviously.
Yeah, the Gold Cup was massive. I was very fortunate. We had 11 races together for 6 Grade 1 wins, and obviously many sort of low points as well. He unseated at Haydock one year in the Betfair, which I thought we were almost a knocking certainty to win. You can never take anything for granted, can you? It's jump racing. But no, yeah, I think the highlight was the Gold Cup. I'll never forget it to the day I die. I can tell you exactly where I was, how I felt, who I spoke to, and yeah, just phenomenal. And you get to a point where you then recognise and you realise that there are certain races you want to win, whether it be a jockey, trainer, owner, groom, whatever. And even now, as a race caller, there's certain races you want to call, because they are the sort of the holy grail. But no, Cheltenham Gold Cup was phenomenal. I met my first member of the royal family after winning the Gold Cup, so that was quite nice. Princess Anne presented me with my prize and all the prizes, and yeah, no, that was fantastic. The Gold Cup was something I'll never ever forget.
I suppose something that comes with a yard being successful are the financial rewards, and you got yourself enough money to buy a pointer.
Yeah, foolishly probably. What a waste of money that was, it turned out. But yeah, I remember one summer, I think it was after 2008, summer of 2008, with racing, all the stable staff get their pool money every third, and ours one year was very, very good. I think at the time it was about probably $2,500, which was a lot of money for a stable lad. And I thought it'd be a great idea to go and buy a pointer. His name was Jack Moon. It was by Moonact, who obviously had a rather savage reputation, and I think he sort of bred a bit of that into Jack as well. But he didn't turn out to be much good for us. But it was nice to have a runner in the colours, and that sort of again got me sort of hooked on racehorse ownership. And I mean, when I was at Seamus Mullins's, I had a pointer as well. But that was a bit different slightly. That was sort of, he was leased to me, and I had him on a lease, and that was a little bit different. But yeah, when I went and bought Jack Moon at Ascot Sales, I'd parted with my hard earned, and I soon realised I wasn't getting it back.
Now, one thing before we finish this first part, I'm convinced that when Kauto Star first raced, it was Kauto Star. Is that right? Correct,
yeah. I think it was one or two other pronunciations as well, but I mean, yeah, we were always set straight by his owner, Clive Smith, who always said, it's take away the K, it's auto, so it's got to be Kauto. But yeah, in the yard we were always Kauto. He was always Kauto. Paul called him Kauto. Clifford Baker called him Kauto. Donna, who used to drive the box, me, we all called him Kauto. So Kauto is what we sort of remember him as, but I guess his official title was Kauto. Yeah.